Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Development Control. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and if everybody could please turn their mobile phones off or to silent. For the benefit of members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I am Chairman of this committee. To my right are councillors who will be making the decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and keep points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning application to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening we have, I think it's nine items on the agenda, so hopefully we should be finished by about 9:30. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout this meeting. Thank you. Where's my chair? Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have got Councillor Cubitt standing in for Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Durrant standing in for Councillor Harvey. Are there any others? No. Declarations of interest. Councillor Durrant.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear that? Item 9, right. Okay, item 2. Some months ago, before I knew I would deputise at this meeting, I had a conversation with a neighbour to the site, and I did express to him a concern I had over that particular development of that particular site, where I didn't feel that it was appropriate for the location. So I had that conversation. I don't know whether that excludes me from.
I think the issue is whether or not you have predetermined the matter, whether you have an open mind and you're able to hear what people say tonight, both the public and your colleagues, before arriving at a decision. And if you're not, then you shouldn't take part.
I think, in all honesty, I don't have a completely open mind on the subject. So should I leave the room for that item or just stay quiet? Okay. You let me know when I can come back.
Councillor Tomley.
Item 9, Chair. I'm on Bramley Parish Council, so I will leave the room. Thank you.
Urgent matters. Not urgent, but now's an appropriate time. From this coming December, viewing panels will be followed immediately by a meeting with the officers, so we can ask any questions regarding any of the applications, and hopefully means we'll get some of the questions out of the way and get a few things settled before we come to the meeting. So we used to have a meeting before viewing panel, We stopped doing that. We're now going to start having a meeting with the officers immediately after viewing panel. So that will appear on your viewing panel agendas. Right. Minutes of the meeting held on 7th of September. Is everybody happy with them? Yeah. Yeah. If I propose them, could I have a seconder? Councillor Frost. Thank you. I'll sign those afterwards. And right. Applications. Number 1, land at Court Drove, Overton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an application for the demolition of the existing outbuilding and the erection of a self-built detached dwelling and formation of a new access. It's an application that returns to committee, having previously been resolved to approve the application. It returns only because of the change to the nitrates proposal, which rather than providing mitigation at the site, looks to buy credits for the Eastleigh Borough Council scheme that is set out in the paper, and a change to the design of the proposed dwelling. They're the only proposed changes, and that's why it comes back. There is an update paper, Chair, provides details of the viewing panel, confirms that Natural England comments are yet to be received, and in that respect, the recommendation within the agenda remains as it was. Provides biodiversity comments, which are then addressed through changes to the conditions within the update paper. Corrects a recommendation to remove the reference to the 1996 to 2011 local plan, providing the current local plan reference instead, and confirms that Hampshire County Council have got no objection as a correction from the main agenda paper, and confirms that biodiversity net gain is to be achieved, and also adds a missed condition 28 regarding the environmental construction management plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. If we could have our first speaker, and that's Dr. Deborah Rolfe. If you can come forward, the speakers' chairs are there on your right. Yep, thank you. The microphone button is on the deck in front of you. You'll have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you. It'll light up red when you've prayed.
Good evening. The problem with this application is their proposed access. They do not need it, and there is no justifiable reason for it. If you've been able to visit the site, you will have seen that the plot has its own double gates and driveway onto the road, Court Drove. The site is currently home to a tree surgery business, and we've never seen any problems with their large vehicles going in and out. There's nothing wrong with the existing access. Their plan proposes closing off that driveway and creating a long new road going a considerable distance from the proposed new house through a green field to exit opposite a primary school and preschool. The primary school and preschool have just shy of 500 children and staff attending their site every school day. It's on a no-through road with very few parking spaces. As you can imagine, at school drop-off and pick-up time, every day on that road there is chaos. Double yellow lines are completely ignored. Parents park anywhere and everywhere. Bollards that were put in 10 years ago had all been knocked out within 2 years. Why do these applicants want to block off the perfectly good driveway they have away from the school to exit opposite the primary school? Their planning statement makes the reason clear. They were unhappy that their previous application for 14 homes was refused. One of the reasons for refusal was a lack of safe access. If they can create a new access road for this one house, they could use that road in a new application for 13 more homes. They can draw a visibility display on a diagram and could paint more double yellow lines on the road. But in reality, at school time, that area would be parked on, so there would not be safe visibility. This would pose a significant risk to the safety of large numbers of children every school day. If you allow this new access, you increase the risk of road accidents involving young children. If you think you must grant permission for this development, please, 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 place a condition that they use their existing driveway. It's in the right place and it's perfectly adequate. If you think you should grant permission, place a condition that they use their existing driveway to help keep children safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you just stay where you are for a moment. Thank you. Questions for the speaker? No, none. Thank you very much. Can you turn the microphone off, please? Next speaker is Lisa Jackson. Good evening, Ms Jackson. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman.
And the microphone is already on.
Yeah, and members. My name is Lisa Jackson and I'm the planning agent for this application. I appeared 15 months ago in front of this committee with a very similar proposal for a single dwelling, which you are minded to approve subject to a legal agreement. And this is material to your decision tonight. This application follows a long story of attempting to gain planning permission for this allocated site that has taken over 4 years. The need for nitrate mitigation makes the allocated scheme for 14 dwellings unviable, undeliverable at present, hence the current application for a single dwelling. Natural England has advised that the site must achieve nitrate neutrality. This is because Overton Sewage Works does not meet the appropriate nitrate standards. It is the new solution on the nitrates that meant it has come back to committee tonight. And it's the updated calculations that meant the nitrates could not be mitigated on-site, but must be mitigated off-site. The nitrate issue was not considered as part of the neighbourhood plan or the local plan. Basingstoke and Dean do not have their own nitrate scheme, and applicants must find mitigation outside the borough, as in this case. The applicant will secure credits at a cost of over £10,000 for this single dwelling. This is with Eastleigh Borough Council, as explained, and the offer has been made and agreed. Given the delay to the processing this application, due to the complications around the nitrate issue, the applicant has reconsidered sensibly the design of the scheme. The energy and climate crisis has prompted the applicant to approach a more sustainable solution, and he now proposes a passive house. The design is a replica of one of the earliest certified passive houses in England, built as a zero-carbon home over 9 years ago. The house will be airtight, super-insulated, triple-glazed, and have a mechanical heat recovery system. The proposal includes a solar PV array. The dwelling will not have a gas or oil boiler, and heating demand is extremely low, meaning effectively it becomes net zero over the year. It is the intention of the applicant to build a house on this plot as a self-build, to act as a demonstration for the other dwellings. The access issue raised by the previous speaker has been considered at the previous appeal. The inspector confirmed that the access was safe. The appeal was not dismissed on access issues. That is very important to know. The County Council do not support the existing access as it is not safe and does not support the future development of the remaining 13 dwellings. Importantly, permission for this single dwelling as a first step does not sterilise the ability to bring forward the remaining part of the allocated site. The parts of the site that could contain the dwellings when a nitrate solution can be found will be retained as paddocks in the interim until an affordable, viable nitrate solution will be available to the rest of the houses.
You have 1 minute remaining.
I would ask that you approve this application that development can commence on this allocated site where it has already been agreed by the planning inspectorate that the form of development is acceptable. And as the committee in July 2021, you resolved to approve a very similar form of development. The proposal is now even more sustainable and could act as an important demonstration of how to build zero-carbon homes with a sympathetic, contextual, rural architectural approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Councillor Court.
Good evening. Can you just clarify what the situation would be for how you intend to deal with nitrates if the overall development went ahead?
I can't give you an answer, I'm afraid, because the council are still looking for a strategic solution for those parts of the borough that need to mitigate their nitrates. There are a number of solutions out there. All sorts of schemes are coming online in different boroughs. There are ones in Test Valley that you can buy into the schemes. So there are schemes available if land and the ability to mitigate nitrate is possible. But at this stage, I can't say what that is. And at the moment, at £10,000 a unit, it's not viable for the whole scheme.
Thank you for the round.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Durrant.
Thank you. Sorry, because I'm new to this, obviously. Just a quick question. My understanding is that the change of nitrate mitigation isn't a planning reason for refusal. And secondly, my concern with this site, having visited it, is the access. And I concur really with the first speaker that it does look to me to be quite a dangerous exit.
Councillor
Thank you, Chair, for answering that through you. So in respect of the nitrates, the proposed nitrate mitigation is just that. It's mitigation to the amount of nitrate that would be put into the site as a result of a single dwelling, whether that's on site or whether that's the Eastleigh scheme. They both provide the same mitigation, the same nitrate neutrality or an improvement to the nitrate situation. So no, that couldn't provide a reason for refusal. On the second point, the access that's now proposed has been the subject of an appeal decision, where the inspector found that the proposed access would be acceptable, and that was the previous resolution of this planning committee. There's no change to the access from when it previously came in July. So it's officers' view and members' previous view that access solution is suitable, and it does result in the closure of that existing access as well, which is nearer to the bend in the road. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Greg just very kindly answered my question, okay, regarding the access, so thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, the application in front of us is only for consideration because the building has changed. The nitrates is something that we really aren't involved with.
It's a material difference to the scheme that you considered in July. So you considered previously a scheme that included a 106 to secure the nitrate mitigation at the site, whereas this proposal is the Eastleigh scheme, which would be secured through conditions. So the resolution of the committee was something that was materially different, but obviously it's officers' view that it's still mitigated appropriately through this alternative. So because it's a material difference, it needed to come back to committee for that reason. And also the applicant's taken the opportunity to review the design in light of the climate emergency. So there's a different elevational treatment to the dwelling, and so it would have come back for that reason as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. I was just concerned with the siting on quite a large site as we walked down to it. Did officers have any discussions, because obviously the level of hard standing to get to that house is quite large, and had it been further up in the plot, then perhaps they wouldn't have to lay down quite so much hard standing initially.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the previous site plan, the one that was previously considered by committee. So you can see it's the members resolved to approve. So you can see it's sited in largely the same location. It's just a different shape. Obviously, the differences are outlined within your report. This is the proposal before us. Obviously, we need to consider the application before us. It is sited in near proximity to the existing pair of dwellings there. Had another proposal come forward for a dwelling elsewhere on the site, we would have had to have considered that in its context, but the proposal here is for a dwelling that's near to other dwellings, and it's not considered to be harmful to character and appearance of the area. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rattigan.
On the basis of that answer, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. We haven't got to the debate stage yet. We're still in questions. But okay. Thank you. There have been no more questions. We will move to debate, and Councillor Rattigan has already proposed it. So is there a seconder? Councillor Court. Anybody, anything they want to say in debate?
Just quickly, I don't see any reason to disallow it, but I do not like buying credits from other places. I think we should be mitigating things in our own borough. I don't see why Eastleigh should get the benefits of nitrate mitigation. We should be stealing, and then we have an overload. I don't see how it works. I don't like credits like that, but I can't see a reason to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. And Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say that, Councillor Freeman, for one time this evening, there is a lot of cross-party support in what you've just said. I too don't like the credit scheme down at Eastleigh, but that's unfortunately the one that's being presented, and that's the one that we've gone with. I don't like it, and I'm not a big fan of this scheme. But you know, I've read the papers, and I can see that the previous scheme was effectively basically the same as this one, okay, just with a different design house and the same entrance. I'm not a big fan of building any more houses on this site, because that will put more vehicle movements out into opposite the school. But I'm in full agreement with Councillor Freeman on this point.
Thank you. Any more for debate? In that case, it's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? And those against? And abstentions? 2. That's approved. Greg?
Thank you, Chairman. If I confirm that application is approved as per the recommendation within the main agenda paper and the update paper, so subject to the confirmation of Natural England. Thank you, Chairman.
Number 2, Bridles View, Bise Lane, Silchester. Sue. Somebody will come and get you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of 2 5-bedroom dwellings with garaging and cycle storage, and also includes the erection of a replacement double garage for the existing property at Bridles View. The officer's recommendation is for approval, and there's nothing on the update. Thank you.
And we only have one speaker, and that's Mr. Thorpe. Good evening, Mr. Thorpe. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button, you found it.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm the agent for the applicant. The application relates to a rural site with a 60-metre wide frontage set on the north side of Bise Lane. It's located within a small ribbon of residential development in between a newly built dwelling to the west at Burgess Farm and an established dwelling, Bridles View, to the east. The site already has planning permission for the erection of a large detached dwelling and triple garage, so the principle of residential development's already been established. We think the approved dwelling is overlarge and wasteful of space, since the site's easily capable of accommodating the 2 family dwellings that are now before you. These both have a design and layout that's more in keeping with local character, plot sizes, and the newly built dwelling to the west. There are no objections from HCC Highways, Natural England, your landscape officer, your biodiversity officer, environmental health or the joint waste team. And Silchester Parish Council raised no objection to the proposal. The application is being considered by committee because the owner of the new dwelling to the west, that's Burgess Farm, suggests that Garage 1, serving Plot 1, might block light to her living room window. Now, Burgess Farm has a north-south principal aspect, so the eastern living room window is in fact a secondary window. This living room is principally lit by a floor-to-ceiling, north-facing, four-section opening patio window that overlooks the back garden. These secondary living room windows on the side elevation that face the garage are feature windows, and they sit either side of a fireplace and chimney breast. They look towards the established shared boundary hedge that already filters their view and which could, if necessary, be replaced by a 2-metre high fence under PD rights along the existing boundary to Bridle's view. A 2-metre PD fence would entirely eliminate the objection, but we would prefer to keep the established hedge since it is much more attractive. Garage 1 is situated 4 metres away from the secondary side windows. It's 5.8 metres wide, 5.8 metres deep and 4.5 metres high to ridge. Now, given the distance between the two buildings and the overall height and depth of the garage, with its roof slope away from the neighbour, there is no demonstrable loss of sunlight, daylight or privacy sufficient to justify a reason for refusal. The objector won't get the view across the applicant's land that she was perhaps hoping for, but of course there isn't a right to a view in this location. The proposed dwellings themselves are chalet style with a rural, slightly barn conversion type character. They fit in well with the local building styles and character, and both dwellings measure 15.06 metres wide by 10.23 metres deep with a bridge height of 7.5 metres.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Their siting design and massing accords with the established pattern of development on the northern side of Byes Lane, so it fits in well with the character and appearance of the surrounding area, and it wouldn't result in significant impacts on either local landscape or the scenic quality of the area. There aren't any highway objections, and the proposal includes a net gain in habitat biodiversity of 16.51%. There's no adverse impact on trees, no flood risk, and the site location is already assessed as sustainable. Given that the objection has no reasonable grounds for success, we respectfully ask the committee to resolve in favour of the planning officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you turn your microphone off, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, thank you very much. Where are you suggesting that you might consider putting a fence because of visibility, but that you would prefer a hedge?
Well, there's an existing hedge in between the proposed garage and the secondary windows to the house. We're not suggesting putting a fence there. The point was that if a 2-metre fence were to be erected under permitted development, you wouldn't be able to see from those windows into the applicant's site.
Thank you. Any more questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Condition 14 about the archaeological programme. Can you put some flesh on the bones there, if you would, about what we expect, how you would expect the applicant to manage that, what would be acceptable?
I can't give any details. It was something that the county archaeologist requested for the single dwelling, and whilst he hasn't commented on the current one, bearing in mind it's exactly the same site and it has the same implications, we've taken the his recommended condition, and that would be something that we would agree with the county archaeologist, but I don't know the details. I don't have that information.
Sorry, just to clarify, I'll come back on that, would that therefore be, if it's the county, someone would be monitoring it rather than we just rely on an applicant to have presented something and implement it without actually checking, because it's a fairly important condition if they, that we want them to complete.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that it's for the applicant to submit that information and for the county archaeologist to consider. And you will either have the county archaeologist will go on site at various points during the development, or they might have a consultant who equally will be recording, and, you know, any issue, you know, finds that they might have on the site there. But the county archaeologist will be then liaising directly with the applicant.
Thank you. Any more questions for officers? Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, so in terms of the potential damage to trees, the tree protection plan, where is it in the conditions that the trees have to be protected from their tree roots?
Condition 13 secures that on page 178.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No more questions. In that case, debate. If nobody's got any debate, I will propose it from the chair. Is there a seconder? Councillor Freeman. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? That's everybody. That is approved. Sue.
Thank you, Chair, that the application is approved according to the officer's report.
Application number 3, Wildwood Farm, Newnham Lane, Old Basing. Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. The third item before you this evening is for Wildwood Farm, Newnham Lane, Old Basing. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the demolition of existing buildings and redevelopment of the site with the erection of seven dwellings. If I take the members' attention to the update paper, the site was subject to the viewing that took place last Friday, and members can read the aspects of the viewing within the paper. Also within the update paper, reference has been made to the appeal decision for 20/03374/FUL, which was an application on the same land but with a larger area for 9 dwellings. The decision was made on the 7th of October with the inspectorate allowing the appeal and permission being granted. The inspectorate considered it acceptable on landscape grounds. There were fewer conditions applied to the appeal decision, and as such it's recommended that some conditions are removed from the recommendation as well as some conditions amended. I've also included measurements have been given within the update paper on comparisons of heights and footprints on the existing approved and proposed scheme. So condition 13 has been removed, and then condition 6 relating to landscape works and trees has been amended to specifically include which shall result in a net increase in canopy cover at maturity. The agent has also confirmed their agreement to the pre-commencement conditions, and the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions as set out in the agenda before you and within the update paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jessica. Could I have our first speaker, which is Councillor Roger Doust? No? He's not here. In that case, Mr. Cobbold. Good evening, Mr. Cobbold. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if I make quite a play on this this appeal decision, which came in after the report was written by the officers. It's obviously a material consideration of great weight, which you'll have to factor into your consideration. I was interested to hear what the parish council were going to say about it and how they were going to address the refusal. It's not the refusal, the approval, I should say. But obviously we've not heard from them, so we'll wait and hear from the ward councillor and see how Councillor Tuck addresses the appeal decision when she addresses you. So I'm just going to explain the background, the difference, and remind the ones who were here of what happened previously, and the new ones I'll tell them how it all panned out. You'll remember with the previous scheme, it was 9 houses, 3 affordable units and an off-site contribution. This was refused against officer recommendation, a judgment influenced by mainly the 2 ward members who made a compelling case to the committee, and it was based around the landscape objection at the time. A landscape objection which didn't factor in the existing development on the site, and I think that's something important for you to consider. The committee's decision was not one of principle. There were no technical objections, and that was a deliberate conclusion after a long debate. The sole reason for refusal was visual and landscape impact of the development. There was also concern amongst the committee, which was led by officers, that some of the development area was not previously developed land, but this wasn't reflected in the reason for refusal. So we had a subjective refusal, which left the door open for these amendments, which we bring forward to you now for a 7-unit scheme, which is a scale-back development on the previously developed land. Quantum of development reducing from 9 to 7, floor area reducing by 42%, height of houses reducing by 2 metres to 7.8 metres. You've got the comparative footprints on your committee paper as well. All of these are considerable concessions. Of course, the unintended consequence of the refusal was that we're now below the threshold for affordable housing in terms of the site area. Then the appeal decision came through. This was received after the committee report was written. Officers already accepted that the site was all previously developed land and that it fell below the affordable housing threshold, but obviously that was endorsed by the inspector. And I'm going to read you a few of the inspector's conclusions, which I think are important to your consideration here. 1, I'm satisfied that the appeal site would be properly described as previously developed land. 2, the development would sit comfortably within the wider landscape, reflecting its rural qualities whilst delivering housing for the area. 3rd quote, I find the proposal would replace existing unattractive site structures with dwellings in keeping with local vernacular. 4, the proposal would replace existing structures with a more considered arrangement of housing designed to mimic in general terms a cluster of farm buildings varying in scale and height. Whilst it would change the long-term views from within the conservation area and the scheduled ancient monument, through the introduction of a different built form, I am satisfied that the proposal would not be harmful to the setting of the conservation area or the wider important views from the monument. The Parish Council never really got its opportunity to respond to the appeal decision. So on your paper, you still got their lingering objections from before the appeal decision came out. As I say, we'll wait and hear what the ward councillor says and whether her approach will be influenced by the appeal decision. But in my mind, I've got no doubt this is a better scheme than the one that's been approved already in terms of what you were looking for previously, in terms of the visual impact and reducing the overall impact of the development. That's the only issue really for your determination here. There are still no technical issues and there were no objections before, as I've already said. So I trust that you'll understand that approving this application is an improvement, has a lesser impact on the landscape, and that you can grant permission now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Cobbold? Start with Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. Are you saying that if we approve this application here tonight, this is the scheme that you will take forward and you will not be relying on the permission that you already have?
No, I'm not saying that because we haven't done the numbers. We don't know which is the better scheme and the most viable scheme financially. That will be something to work out as and when and if we get planning permission today. And we've got the comparison to make at the moment. We've only got 1 extant permission, therefore there's no comparison to make at the moment.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. You stated there's no technical issues brought up last time. We discussed the fact there's no main sewerage. We discussed that there was an issue with the bin storage and it would end up on Newnham Lane because the bin lorry can't turn around on the site. And there was also an issue raised with surface water drainage onto Newnham Lane, which ponds down at the bottom, and I believe it was ponded last week. So I just wondered if you could address those issues, those technical issues.
Can do. I'll start with the third because it's freshest in my mind. The drainage is, there's a full drainage report which has been submitted with the application, which addresses how it will work. There will be a management of the surface water drainage through the scheme, which will be a betterment to the existing situation because it's managed, whereas at the moment it's not a managed system. I think there was a misunderstanding last time about refuse collections. There's no reason why the refuse collection cannot go up to the site and collect the bins, and that was always the intention from my perspective. And sorry, what was the first issue? The first question?
The main sewerage.
There is no main sewerage, so that will be a managed system on site as it was previously.
Can I have a subsequent?
Councillor Gaskell.
Yeah, so back to the bin storage, we did discuss that, and it actually says in the document that the bin lorry won't turn round in that site. It's going to be an access problem. And then we did raise a concern about the sewerage. If it's on septic tanks and it leaks, so they're not empty properly, it's adjacent to the chalk stream and it will just flow into the chalk stream. So we were concerned about that.
Is there a question there? Sorry.
Sorry, what was your question, Councillor Gaskell?
It's more to do with the management. I mean, the statement was made there was no technical issues brought up last time, and there was quite a few technical issues. I don't believe those technical issues have been addressed properly.
But Councillor Gaskell, that's not a question. We need a question to the Speaker. What is your question?
So, yeah, I mean, just can he address the issues relating to septic tanks not being emptied correctly, mitigation against surface water drainage, how that's going to be done and managed, and can he address how the bin storage, particularly on bin collection day, is going to be addressed?
Yeah, I can do. Sorry, I will just clarify what I said. I said there were no technical objections and reasons for refusal to the previous application. That was my words. I've just been informed that my mistake. There is main sewer up there, so the main sewers can deal with the foul waste. In terms of the bin lorry, my understanding, a genuine understanding, is that a bin lorry can go up to site and turn on site, and that is how it's always been designed. I'm not quite sure where the idea that it couldn't has come into consideration. Certainly, tracking has been provided showing how the bin lorry will come up to site. And from memory, I do recollect that the council and the committee actually acknowledged that and eventually came to that conclusion previously as well. But I'm obviously going back a year in my memory and a lot's happened in that time.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Cubitt.
Yeah, I'm a little confused, Mr. Cobbold, about your reference to affordable homes, because I understood that the previous application was for 9, and I was unaware of any affordable homes being included in that. Is that correct? My first question.
No, that's not correct. The approved scheme allowed on appeal had 3 affordable homes on site, and it had 0.6 of a home delivered through as an off-site financial contribution. Why was that? Because whilst the number of houses was below the threshold of 10 for affordable housing, the site area was above 0.5 of a hectare. So it tripped it into, and we acknowledged that all along. That was always part of the offering at that point. By forcing us back to previously developed land, but in the previous refusal, it brought the site area under the 0.5 of a hectare, which is the threshold for affordable housing, and therefore the 7-unit scheme, which you've got in front of you, does not trip the affordable housing threshold and need to deliver affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cobbold. In terms of the landscape, because you said there wasn't any real valid reason for rejecting the previous application, I mean, it's pretty explicit in all of the landscape studies that we've got that this is on the crest of a hill, and that site has always been deemed to the east of Basing as wholly inappropriate for development. Nonetheless, we are where we are with regards to the inspector. In your view, why could you explain to us, the committee, why this is preferable to the impact on landscape than the original one? Is my second question, and I have a third. Thank you.
I think it's a logical conclusion to make. If you've got a development of let's not talk about the unit numbers, let's talk about the heights. So the majority in the 9-unit scheme were 9.8 metres high. These are now no more than 7.8 metres high, so you've got 2 metre lower, and one of the main considerations was the height of the development last time. We had a long debate, I remember it well, about the comparative heights between the existing buildings and the proposed buildings. So obviously you've got that reduction, you've got a reduction in floor on floor areas, 1,972 approved, 1,148 now proposed, so a reduction, quick maths, 850 square metres, give or take. Reduction in floor area, that's a 42% reduction. All of those add up, it must do, to having a better visual impact compared with the one that's been approved.
Councillor Cubitt, we have a strict rule on this committee that it is 2 questions at any time. 2 questions to a speaker, 2 questions from any councillor to a speaker or to the officers. So I'm sorry, I can't allow a 3rd question. Are there any questions from anybody else? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Cobbold. And Councillor Tuck, please. Good evening, Councillor Tuck. You have 4 minutes, and I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I disagree with the planning inspector's findings and do not reach the same conclusions. But as that boat has sailed, my comments are directed at the planning conditions for this application. I've got 7 points. 1, how will the tree buffer surrounding the site be legally protected in perpetuity for screening and ecological reasons, especially since it is not contained within the application site? 2, the tree buffer needs to be of mixed native trees and to include some evergreen trees such as holly and yew if the screening function is to be effective for more than half the year. And I've been bitten on other applications if I don't look at the detail of the planting plans. 3, the required visibility splay on Newnham Lane looks to me as though it will result in loss of hedgerow or dwarfing to 1 metre of the hedgerow. What biodiversity compensation will be required for this loss or reduction? 4, skylarks were recorded in this area this summer. They are suffering dramatic population decline and are red listed. House martins are also in this area. Please see that they are added to the ecological plan. 5, surface water runoff. What provision has been made to prevent the hard surfaces from contributing to runoff into the Loddon chalk stream at the bottom of the hill? 6, the applicant states that there is existing foul drainage, which is doubted by nearby residents. Given the increased load this connection will bear, can we have a condition that ensures it is correctly connected for sewerage and a mechanism to check this? And 7, whilst materials are reserved items, they must comply with the old Basing and Litchpit neighbourhood plan and village design statement. For example, in this rural setting, to include bricks matching the colours of the historic brickwork of the village, clay tiles, stone, proper timber and not PVC, for example. In summary, I acknowledge that this application has made some effort to be of a more appropriate scale and proportions than the 9-dwelling application, and with careful selection of materials that can be improved upon. The choice of trees and shrubs around this plot will be important, as it will either look like a well-placed extension of the adjacent ancient woodland, able to contribute positively to the ecology of the area, or a B&Q bargain sale of everything nobody wanted. Thank you.
Questions for Councillor Tuck? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Cubitt.
Yeah, am I allowed to ask more than 2 questions of officers? Well, first question is, why have they changed the 2 conditions that they've changed? That's the first question. 6 and 13, please.
So condition 13. Condition 13 was already partly covered by condition 6, which is the landscaping condition for trees and shrubs. So then we've amended 6 to just make sure that it includes a net increase in canopy cover at maturity within that condition.
This is the same question, please, Chairman. I need a bit more clarity. Does that mean if you're incorporating 13 into 6, you will be requiring supported drawings, that there will be clarity? I'm just wondering whether we as members ought to see the amended condition number 6 before we agree to the amendments to the conditions of tonight.
It is in the update paper, so and it does require a scheme of landscaping to be submitted and approved by the local planning authority before any landscaping works commence on site. It's on page number 9 of the update paper.
So I can't see any comment of canopy apart from, okay, net increase. But I can't see any submissions, pre-approved submissions, supported drawings, fell canopy, location, blah, blah. Can't see any of that. You're just requiring a net increase.
So on page 9 of the update, condition 6, this is the amended one, on the 5th line down, it says here the works approved which shall result in a net increase in canopy cover at maturity. So that's the additional bit, that's the change, that's what's merging the two together.
So are we requiring drawings?
Any landscaping scheme that comes in comes in as drawings together with a list of schedule of all the species that's going in, the size, etc. So yes, there'll be drawings. That's all covered in a normal landscaping condition.
Second question relates to the comments of Councillor Tuck. Can we incorporate her requests in relation to tree buffers, visibility displays, skylarks, provisions reference the runoff, the foul drainage, more certainty, and specifically, and most importantly of all, in view of the comments of our landscape officer and the statement that it is very urban in its context, and in view of the fact it breaches all of our landscape capacity studies to date, because of its views from ancient monuments, and goes against and flies against all our policies in relation to landscape capacity, that the materials and the design adhere to the Old Basing Village Design Statement and the Old Basing Neighbourhood Plan, notwithstanding.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's a range of conditions within the agenda paper. There's 27 conditions covering a range of matters from landscape controls, condition 6, to drainage matters, to tree protection, condition 11, to biodiversity enhancement and management. That's obviously very important at condition 24, development being carried out in accordance with the recommendations contained within the ecological appraisal at condition 23. So there's 27 conditions there that would be required to be complied with. So I would suggest that's a comprehensive set of conditions. And the second point I'd make is this application is a lesser scheme to an application that's already been allowed at appeal for 9, as we've heard. The conditions, the one amendment to the conditions from your order paper, which is in the update paper, has been amended to reflect the conditions within that appeal decision, where the inspector didn't agree with the tree canopy cover condition and amalgamated it with condition 6. So it reflects that. So the approved scheme for 9 could be built with the conditions that are very similar to the conditions that we've got before us. And I think any, which is a wide range of conditions in itself, but any additional conditions wouldn't meet the tests that any condition must meet to make a development acceptable in plain terms.
Thank you, Greg. I've got Councillor Gaskell, followed by Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Court. Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I've got some concerns. There seems to be a lack of clarification on sewerage, also on the bin lorry coming up there, and I guess the surface water drainage. But my question really is there any sort of provision we can put in place to make sure that it is main sewerage? And also my concerns about wheelie bins on Newnham Lane. If the lorry can't get up there, then there's going to be potentially 24 bins there, plus the 2 houses which aren't shown on the plans, which are being built on the corner. So there's potentially 30 bins on that lane, and it's just not a satisfactory place to put them. So is there anything we can put in place to make sure something is done to ensure that's safe and sort of done well? Thank you.
I'll take your first question first in respect of the mains drainage. The proposal is for mains drainage. That is what their proposal is for. If they wanted to do something different to that at some point in the future, that would constitute development and it would need a planning application in its own right. And that's not what's before us. In terms of the bins, the waste team have raised concerns in terms of a waste lorry being able to access the site, and so that is what would happen. The bins would have to be left potentially on Newnham Lane, and that is the situation for the scheme for 9 dwellings as well. So there would be less bins with this scheme than there would be for the Newnham Lane scheme. Obviously, the waste officer has made the comments that they have made, and if the site weren't able to be serviced by a council waste lorry, then they'd have to arrange for a private collection. There's no reason that that couldn't be added as an informative if that was a concern that members had. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I'll withdraw my question. It's just been answered. Thank you.
We've got Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Durrant, and Councillor Frost first.
Thank you, Chair. It's really a question to officers that if the previous application, was allowed on appeal, I'd like officers to clarify why this is a better scheme in their opinion, bearing in mind the fact that we've effectively lost social housing from this particular site. Could you please give us the professional opinion? Thank you.
So the trigger wasn't met for affordable housing on this application, so it's not considered within the report. But in terms of why it's a better scheme, it's the reduced heights and bulk and scale on site. So the footprints as well have reduced as well as the height. So the impact on the landscape is lesser than the previously approved. Is discussed within the report. Sorry, within the update paper.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's actually on that subject. Just please, could you just clarify that the decision allowed at appeal did not remove any 106 conditions about affordable housing? In other words, that extant planning permission at appeal would provide affordable housing.
Yes, it did secure Section 106. So.
Councillor Durrant.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, really. So tell me to shut up if I've got it wrong. I thought I heard the first speaker say that if this is approved, they then have a choice of 2 applications. They can choose which one to go with. If they went with the 9 house, would the conditions be as per the original application, or would they be as these now, what seem to be possibly preferable conditions for development of the site?
Yes, so the specific conditions for this would only apply to this scheme, and then the appeal decision by the inspectorate, their conditions would be for that scheme. So it's the specific conditions.
Okay, I see no more hands up for questions, so debate. Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Okay. having been on the site visit now, there's a lot been made about the landscape impact, but what's on there at the moment isn't particularly pretty. There's a whole bunch of storage containers and the place really is unattractive, and I think that putting houses up there would be infinitely preferable and far more in keeping with the area than the sort of industrial bits you can see up there. It's not pretty, and I think that either scheme would be an improvement, and I'd much rather have this one than the slightly larger one that already has approval. So after the debate, I'm quite happy to propose a motion to approve the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. It's been proposed for approval. Is there a seconder? Oh, take me pick. Councillor Bowes. Do you want to speak on it, Councillor Bowes? In that case, I've got I've got Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Howard-Sorrell, and then Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really difficult one, this, because the previous site of 9 dwellings, of which we had affordable homes in there, okay, has been allowed on appeal. Obviously, this is a small development, so I'm struggling to understand how we can possibly refuse it, because if we do, it will just go to appeal again, okay, and therefore, reluctantly, okay, it gets my my support, but it is very reluctantly, because I would prefer the first scheme where we had some social housing on there, but that's not in the purview of this particular application. Thank you.
Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. I think this application is a great example of what this committee does best. We've had a number of concerns raised by a number of different parties, and they've all been quite effectively batted away by the officers in most cases. It's a great example of the officers' professionalism and attention to detail, because basically every single concern that has been raised has been already addressed within the report. So I'm fully in favour of approving this, and I'm happy to put it on the record that the officers have done a great job, despite some members' insistence that the report isn't up to scratch. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Really, it's actually reiterating what Councillor Frost said. I mean, what's in front of us is basically a sort of, it's an odd choice of words, but a win-win in the sense, if you go with the first one, you get social housing, and if you go with the second one, we get a smaller development. So, that's what I see. But what I wanted just to add, that please, the informative that Greg Chapman announced, and some of the conditions that were mentioned by Councillor Tuck, but through Councillor Cubitt, that we make the proposer ask them whether they would want those put in. Thank you.
Quite happy to see those put in. I would agree that yes, the informative and the conditions, especially around the ecological stuff with the skylarks, etc., would, as long as that's put in there, I'd be quite happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify that that's an additional, a suggested additional element to condition 24 with regard to skylarks, biodiversity enhancement management plan, specifically, I suppose it should say J to include skylarks, I presume.
I think it was skylarks and house martins, was it, on site? Certainly, if we've got any red listed species up there, then we should be protecting them.
Nesting beds. But
yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval with the conditions that we've heard. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. And those against? 1. Thank you. That is abstentions? 2. That is approved. Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. To confirm that application has been approved, subject to conditions informative with the additional informative. Thank you. Chair.
Item number 4, land at Hollington Lane, Walton Hill and Newbury. Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application at land at Hollington Lane. The proposal is for a variation of conditions for the extent technical details application approved in December 21. The scheme seeks a variation of 10 different conditions across that scheme. Of most note are changes to the design of Plot B and also changes to design of Plot A, which includes a change to the ridge height on the side element of the building and a movement of that building by 2.5 metres. This application is recommended for permission subject to the case officer's recommendations at the end of the report. There is an update paper in front of you. This highlights there were some late or additional plans submitted which just dealt with a technical issue with scaling on the plans. That, as a result, that shows that Plot B retains its height as originally approved. In my case officer's report, it was a mention of a 0.2 increase, but that was incorrect, and that was due to a scaling issue. And there were further typographical errors corrected, and the conditions were then updated to reflect the amended plans submitted and reference to those plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. If we could have our first speaker, which is Councillor Andrew Watson. Good evening, Councillor Watson. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. The microphone button is on the deck in front of you.
This discussion is essentially about whether the designs for 2 proposed new builds comply with applicable planning regulations and requirements. Our view is that they don't, for 2 principal reasons. The first concerns height, the second concerns dark skies and light spillage. Having said this, there do appear to be compromise solutions for each of these 2 issues. With regard to height, the picture is somewhat confusing because the applicant has compared proposed changes against a drawing which has been withdrawn, rather than against the drawing which has been previously approved. As far as we can make out, the position is as follows. The previously approved drawing provided a variety of heights to the buildings, serving to reduce the risk of the buildings having an unduly dominant visual impact on the area. You'll see from the elevations for plots A and B that the proposed revisions would create greater bulk and mass on both plots, although the revised heights on plot A are a particular concern because they will have an unnecessarily intrusive impact on the neighbouring properties, particularly on Scribblers and Hollington Corner. If you look at the block plan, our suggested compromise solution is that the building proposed for plot A should either be reduced in height to the height originally approved, i.e. 6.24 metres, and or be relocated several metres further towards plot B, thereby alleviating the intrusive impact on both Scribblers and Hollington Corner. With regard to dark skies, we're pleased to note that the applicant has agreed timers for external lighting. But the other significant issue which needs to be resolved is the impact of light spillage from the considerable amount of extra glass which is now proposed for plot B, as the elevation clearly demonstrates. Our view is that this is likely to have a seriously detrimental impact on the dark skies and wildlife in the vicinity of the plot and the surrounding area. The officer's report dismisses reference to the nearby sink on the basis that planning has already been granted, which is correct, but it was for a design which had significantly less glass. We therefore request that this aspect be reconsidered. This building would face onto a woodland sink, and in this regard, the MPPF states that decisions should limit the impact of light pollution from artificial light on intrinsically dark landscapes and nature conservation. Furthermore, the AONB guide at page 24 refers to a planning application which was dismissed at appeal in the Chilterns, due to the amount of glazing facing an adjacent woodland which provided no mitigation for light spillage.
You have 1 minute remaining.
There is a compromise solution for this issue too. Either reduce the amount of glass on the two main facades and/or impose a condition requiring the use of smart glass to mitigate the amount of light spillage. Apart from these two key issues, we'd also suggest that if this application is to be approved, an addition to condition 9 relating to lighting should include a reference to the AONB Good Lighting Guide. Last, but by no means least, we would also suggest a new condition to reflect and confirm the applicant's undertaking to connect to mains drainage, which has previously been discussed but I understand has not been documented. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Can you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you. Questions to the speaker? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Barton, please. Good evening, Mr. Barton. You have 4 minutes, and I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I would like to say that I can understand two families' excitement at building their dream homes, but I should point out that the owners of the neighbouring properties, Scribblers and Hollington Corner, also considered their properties their dream homes until faced with the proposals before this committee tonight. Our concerns have been raised several times with the planning officer, and we have suggested solutions which would make the development more bearable for us, but still achievable in a satisfactory way with the applicants. At the start, we were worried about the drains, and this now would appear to be resolved by B&D planning, insisting on connection to the mains drains in Church Road. Our second major worry was the mass of brick and tile of the barn-style wing of the house on Plot B that we will both look directly at from our homes. Now the revised plans have increased the overall height of this part of the building by 0.54 metres. The applicant's architect in his latest design and access statement makes misleading statements, but the net outcome is the actual height is increased by 0.54 metres, which will affect the neighbouring properties. The design statement actually goes on to also say that they've moved the building on Plot A 2.5 metres, creating more distance between the adjacent housing and allowing the existing mature silver birch to be retained. The overall thing is that this means that 7.15 metre high slab of building will stretch more than 3/4 of the way across our homes, and the shadow will create for Scribblers and Hollington Corners. We've had a surveyor who specialises in planning to report on sight lines and shadow lengths, and it is worrying, particularly in the winter when the shadow length actually reaches over 44 metres. He stated in his report, "I cannot see any reason why the house on Plot A could not be moved even further away from Scribblers and Hollington Corners, as there is 12 metres between the proposed house and the southwest boundary of Plot A with Plot B. So moving the house 6 metres instead of 2.5, that is a total of 13 metres, would help with the overshadowing, particularly in winter. Also, in the latest version of plans, extra windows have been added both in the first and the ground floor of Plot A house. While we acknowledge that the future occupants want extra windows to allow light into their kitchen, walk-in wardrobe, etc., could not all these windows use obscured glass? To balance the increase in height and the extra windows, we would like the committee to consider the suggestion, which we feel is a very fair compromise, that a condition of approval be that the house and garage on Plot A be positioned 13 metres from the boundary with the existing dwellings of Scribblers and Hollington Corner.
You have 30 seconds left.
This would not adversely affect the new property as the house will be positioned more or less centrally on the plot and still enjoy the benefit of extensive garden views, but it would make a huge difference to Scribblers and Hollington Corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Barton? No? Thank you very much. And our third speaker, Mr. Smith, please. Sorry. My mistake, Ms. Smith. Should learn to read, shouldn't I? You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I'm Julie Smith, and this is my husband, Nigel. We've lived in East Woody for 14 years with our 2 sons. It is a long-held dream of ours to build our own home. We bought the land at Hollington Lane in December 21 with permission to build 2 houses of similar size, location and height as are being proposed here today. The amendment request is set out to achieve 3 things. Meet the conditions set in the extant agreement, to personalise the house on Plot B to meet our family's requirements, and the proposals to alleviate our neighbours' concerns. I admit that we hadn't anticipated the level of concern about the site from our new neighbours, because permissions were already in place to build 2 very similar houses before we purchased the land, and that 2, rather than up to 4 houses, as originally agreed in the PIP, were to be built. We were, however, pleased to see a good number of local people support the amendments proposed. We really don't want to be bad neighbours, as Plot B will be our forever home. So we've tried to listen to our neighbours' concerns and mitigate them. And I'll outline some of those amendment requests below. The original design on Plot A included an error in the barn-style portion of the house on the first floor and required a small design amendment. This has resulted in the increase in ridge height, but it remains below that of the main roof height, and we've requested that the house move 2.5 metres southwards in mitigation. We have found ways for both houses to join the main sewage to alleviate our neighbours' concerns. We do propose that the planning team review and agree any external lighting plan to protect the dark skies and to alleviate the neighbours' concerns raised. As we're building our forever home on Plot B, we want to make some alterations to meet our family's needs. The house proposed is a little smaller than in the extant permission and is no taller, but it includes a downstairs bedroom so we can accommodate our parents as they age, and the glazed entranceway that has moved from the northeast elevation to the southeast elevation. And that actually improves privacy for all of the northern neighbours, and it better addresses the street scene. Both garages have a proposed new location. Plot A moves closer to the host house and further away from the northeast boundary. And on Plot B, the proposal is to move the garage to the northeast boundary, facing away from the neighbouring properties and adjacent to Plot A's driveway. The proposed window configuration on Plot A on the northeast boundary has been redesigned to show greater consideration to our neighbours, with 2 eye-level windows on the ground floor rather than the 4, and 2 roof lights rather than 3 in the extant permissions. We've proposed a tall, mature hedge on the northeast boundary of Plot A and have offered to protect the silver birch tree, which our neighbours have said is important to them. We hope you agree that the requested amendments proposed do not significantly deviate from the extant permissions, nor do we request an increase in the size of the houses. We're a family who've really enjoyed living in Wootton Hill, and we're really keen just to get on with building our forever home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. We've just heard a comment from the applicant regards the revisions to drawings to accommodate some of the neighbours' comments, probably best put. Are the drawings we have here, do they properly represent the most recent set of drawings that have been provided?
So yes, the drawings in front of you are the drawings we have worked on during the application, so it includes the amendments discussed. So yeah.
Just to clarify, those are the amendments that the applicant has made to address the neighbours' observations.
Yeah, I believe so. So that's the drainage, which we've secured details on the drainage details to the main sewers. I think the ridge height on the area of concern did drop by 300 mil from the original, so there was a concession there, although I know the neighbour is still concerned. And I think we made some design changes to plot B during the application course. So the drawings you have in front of us are the latest drawings and include all the changes.
Those also accommodate the issues to do with dark skies.
The dark skies one, we have a condition on it which the applicants agreed to control outside lighting, so light spill from outside sources. So they will submit details to us for us to approve lighting positions and strength.
Thank you, that's fine.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking through the conditions, and I may have missed it, but is there a condition removing permitted development rights to help protect the houses to the north?
Yes, so there is condition 19 states that class A, B, C, D and E of part 1 schedule 2 of the PD rights is removed, so yes, we have removed them.
Are there any more questions? In that case, debate. In that case, I will move it from the chair for your seconded by Councillor Frost. Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, and those against? And abstentions? 1, 2 abstentions. Yes, quite right. Thank you. That is approved. Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. So that is approved subject to the conditions and recommendations at the base of the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 5 to 8. I think we'll have a 5-minute comfort break. Back before 8 o'clock, please. Right, thank you. I think we're all back. Hello. Right, when I did the minutes, I only proposed the minutes of the 28th of September. I missed the ones for the 12th of October. I'm not going to propose them because I wasn't here, so could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Frost, and a seconder, Councillor Rattigan. Thank you very much. Item number 5. Yep, number 5, land adjacent to the A339 Headley. Luke.
Thank you, Chair. This application is land adjacent to the A339 in Headley. The proposal is for permission in principle for the erection of a minimum of 1 dwelling and a maximum of 2 residential dwellings. The application is recommended for permission as per the reasons provided in the planning officer's reports, and there is no update. Thank you. Oh no, sorry, there is an update. Oh no, I'm getting confused, sorry.
Thank you, Luke. And if we could have our first speaker, Mr. Taylor, please. Sorry, I've done it again. Ms. Taylor must learn to read. Just ignore me. Most people do. You will have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is an application for permission in principle. So the issues for consideration are whether this location is a suitable location for up to 2 residential dwellings. So there will be a later technical detail stage, and it is that point in time when we will consider in greater detail matters such as ecology and trees and drainage and so on, if we get that far. So I'm obviously appearing for the applicant here. We're of the opinion that the application is policy compliant. It's small-scale residential development outside the settlement boundary. We say there is a locally agreed need because of the lack of housing supply, and also it's not in an isolated location. The council's officer has accepted that this is not an isolated form of development. There is a bus stop opposite with services direct to Newbury or Kingsclere and Basingstoke in the other direction. There's also a pavement outside, so the ability to walk into the village. So there's an acceptance that it's not an isolated location. It's also in close proximity to other residential dwellings along the A339. And the NPPF recognises that in terms of sustainable transport, there will be a variance between what can be achieved between urban and rural settlements. So irrespective of the policy question, so we take the view that it does comply with policy SS6. The case officer has said that it doesn't because there's no locally agreed need for housing, which puts you into the tilted balance here in paragraph 11D. And so that ultimately is the question of whether this is sustainable development and do the adverse impacts outweigh the benefits. So the proposal is sustainable development. The economic benefits and social and environmental have been outlined in the report by the officer. And in terms of whether there are adverse impacts which outweigh the benefits, of course, because it's a permission in principle application, we're talking about adverse impacts associated with the location, the land use, or the quantum of development proposed, which is up to 2 dwellings. So the officer has concluded that the density which we've proposed is appropriate. We've said a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 2 dwellings. The officer has also concluded that this would be acceptable in regard to landscape. It would not be visually intrusive or incongruous within the wider landscape. There's been no objection from highways, and I would note that the access is already in place and approved under a previous permission. So there's an acceptance that this permission in principle stage does not result in a planning permission which is capable of being built out at this point in time. There's a lot more work that will be needed should you be minded to grant this PIP application now, and the applicant will work with their wider team to ensure that the design which comes forward suitably addresses ecological issues on the site,
You have 45 seconds left.
tree issues, biodiversity net gain, refuse collection and drainage, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Councillor Frost.
you, Chair. I noticed on the application here, if we can just go back to the site plan, please. Okay, that one there, thank you very much. Okay, that the access road continues past the this application. I just want to know how many more houses are you going to put on that site?
There's no proposal for additional houses. There's actually permission for an agricultural building further down into the site, which is associated with the applicant's business, which he operates there, which is growing tree whips. So the road, the access and that road was consented as part of the proposal for that building, which is used in association with the tree growing business.
Thank you. Any more questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No? No questions for officers? Councillor Durrant.
Again, it's just my confusion here. We said we were looking at this for the suitability for the site for development, but the reasons for approval only really talk about the 5-year land supply rather than what is the suitability of the site for development. The two don't seem to mesh, if you understand what I mean. I would have expected to see some other reasons rather than just 5-year land supply.
Thank you for your question. I believe, so under the PIPs, we are asked to look at three main things, which is location, land use, and amount of development. And the headline of that reason for approval mentions those three items. So, from my opinion, the location, land use, and amount of development is acceptable, which is said in the first sentence. And then, obviously, we're building in outside settlement boundaries, therefore, I refer to the housing land supply as part of that argument. So there are two elements to that reason for approval.
Thank you, sir. Excuse my naive ignorance on the matter.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know how much notice has the adopted neighbourhood plan for Ashford Hill and Headley been taken into approving this particular PIP, and also while we don't have any consultation with Hampshire County Council Highways, okay, I personally know this road and it is extremely dangerous. I've almost been killed on it myself in the last 4 months, and I'd like officers' input into that, please.
Thank you for your question. So, firstly, the highways, they were consulted and they are mentioned within the consultees, no objections. I also spoke with the highway officer and he confirmed that he was satisfied that the visibility met the technical standards and therefore would be safe and safe access could be achieved. And regarding your second question was to do with the neighbourhood plan, that was reviewed as part of the submission. It's mentioned in the policy consideration. And I believe I also mentioned it at the end of each section. I referred to the relevant policies under the landscape LE1 and NE1 of the neighbourhood plan are mentioned, so they were considered as part of the planning application or the PIP application.
Could you turn your microphone off, please, Councillor Ross? Thank you. Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, thank you. Just going further on from Councillor Durrant's comments, when we had the inspector in for a members' panel meeting, he said that just because we don't have a 5-year housing supply doesn't mean that any of our other tests fall by the wayside. He was pretty clear about that. So, and I do accept the planning in principle requires these three aspects to be considered: location and land use. I just want to kind of understand a bit more from you why you think this location is suitable for the two, and I'd like to know why you think that extraordinary access, which just looks like it's going to be a subsequent follow-on, is acceptable.
So firstly, I think my report, it sets out the reason. I mean, first off, it is outside the settlement policy, but it is a sustainable location. There is a bus stop just outside the site that goes every hour, I think, between Newbury and Basingstoke. So I felt there was a sustainability. Newbury is about 3 miles away, so it's relatively close, and there's Tadley supermarkets not too far, so I believe it was sustainable. In terms of landscape and the setting, I felt it's neatly within the settlement pattern of the area. The two additional complement the two current houses on site, so there was a landscape and character of the area pattern that it would sort of reinforce. And then in terms of the rest of the details, the biodiversity and the tree side, obviously they will be concentrated in at the technical detail stage. So I can't consider them as a pit, but I am confident that they can be hopefully be addressed through obviously private professional consultation. And sorry, I've forgotten your second question. Was the highways?
The Trojan horse access route. I mean, it's kind of like glowing red.
So as the planning agent highlighted, there is a barn further up the site, so the access was approved under a 2017 permission. So the access was part of that, and the access tracks follows the road edge up to that barn. So this scheme then seeks to obviously utilise the access and that track, and so the red edge cuts off where it cuts off because that access trust then carries on. So that's where we are with it at the moment. This is the scheme in front of us. There is no scheme for further development on the site, and if that were to come forward, obviously we would consider it at that point, and go from there.
Thank you. Councillor Rattigan.
It's my belief there's an access at the top end where is that not correct? Is that not for the barn? Is that not how it sits?
There is an access, and without rereading the permission, I believe it might have been required to be stopped up when the other permission was granted, but that was something I would have to, I haven't got in front of me, but that was,
well,
from memory, that's where we
on
were.
the basis you can't tell me where the access is, can we have this deferred then?
This scheme is via this access and is considered acceptable. I don't think it's material to the consideration of this application if there's another access on the site. It certainly won't be serving this development.
Well, the case is that opens the whole of the development to a Trojan horse. So for any number of homes on that, now, you know, I've obviously been on the site. There are saplings that are in there that could easily be removed and frankly just open the whole site up. It is a huge site for two homes.
Councillor Rattigan, we're in questions to officers. Yeah, so if you could ask your question, that would be appreciated.
I would firstly suggest this application is for two dwellings, and that is what we are considering here today. It's not for the wider development of the site. This scheme has been revised. There was a scheme of 1 to 4, which has been taken down to 2 with the agreement of the applicants. They're happy to go down to 2. And I think if more development is to happen on this site, it certainly will be considered as a planning application, and therefore we can consider whether it's acceptable to grant it or refuse it at that stage.
Chair, so if I could just add to that in respect of the access. Obviously, first of all, this is an application which is a PIP. So access isn't considered at this stage. It will be considered through the technical details consent, even though it is an existing access. So in reality, there won't be another access solution proposed. But I think what's more to the point is that we have got no objection from Hampshire County Council as the highway authority to this application, with advice that it meets the appropriate technical standards, and we've got no empirical evidence to the contrary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions for officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, on the basis that PIPs have to be considered on location, land use and amount of development, I think this application fails both location and land use. It's outside the settlement policy boundary, and therefore I think it fails on the location. The parish council couldn't have been more clear about the impact, the importance of agriculture, the prominence of the landscape, and the further urbanisation. So I think it's a bit flippant just to say because we haven't got a 5-year housing supply, we don't have to adhere to our local plan because we've been told we can. And our parish council in that area couldn't be more clear that they consider that it should be refused. And I think we should consider the parish council's views very, very seriously.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. As a basic principle, I don't like PIPs as they come out, but especially on greenfield sites, and this is a greenfield development. It's outside the settlement boundary, and there is, in my view, when the reason for approval are only lack of a housing 5-year land supply, it is a pretty poor show that we could not have better reasons for approval written into this report. And I genuinely believe that the neighbourhood plan that was voted successfully through this council last month had 92% support, which outlined the wish to have small developments. Well, it meets that criteria. Is it the right place? Well, yeah, I think most people would say there's a linear development along the A339. But in terms of what it does, it says we're open for business, and we cannot have a situation where all we are doing is red flagging my parish, the parish of Councillor Frost, to greater and greater development, just because we don't have a housing 5-year land supply. There has to be better reasons in it, and therefore the settlement boundary is important. The fact that it is open countryside, the fact that the development gives us no clue. I mean, that isn't an entrance. That isn't an entrance to tend trees. It's an entrance for a housing estate. It's not previously developed land, and therefore, in my view, cannot be supported by me anyway, although I take, of course, the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Howard Sorrell.
I completely get the concerns of the other members, but I disagree in this case. I think the access road isn't a signal that there's going to be future development here, not that that's a relevant planning consideration anyway. It's already been approved for an entirely unrelated commercial development, so I think it's paranoia at best for people to be making sweeping statements about it being a Trojan horse, for example. I'm happy to move approval because it's a PIP, and in principle it can be developed on. So,
thank you. It's been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Freeman, thank you. Do you wish to speak on it? No, thank you. Anybody else wish to contribute? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Sorry, Greg.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that obviously I've heard that there's a concern that if you were to develop this site, it would have an impact in terms of landscape. I understand that developing any greenfield site will have an impact. However, the position is that we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, so you've got to consider that impact, and it would have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It's not just it's got an impact and therefore it's unacceptable. It would have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So just that's what we need to keep in mind when you're weighing up the balance. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Rattigan, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to the officer's comment there, okay, about needing a demonstrative reply, I think the first time there was an accident coming out of that entrance, okay, will be a demonstrative, okay, reason why this development shouldn't go forward in PIP stage or any other way, okay. I think everyone acknowledges that the A339 is an extremely busy road. As I said before, I was almost killed on here 4 months ago looking, okay, at another planning application which was just a little further down, okay, from here, okay. The road is horrific, okay, and while you know, one vehicle, maybe two could get away with it. Okay, they will have trouble getting out, okay, going either way to Basingstoke or to Newbury. And if there are any more houses built, then, you know, no one's going to get out, because I regularly see, okay, cars coming out of the junction further up with Headley, taking, you know, 10, 15 minutes to actually get out onto the 339.
Thank you, Councillor Frost, but I would remind everybody that access is not a consideration on a PIP. That comes in the technical detail consent. I've got two more speakers, which is Councillor Rattigan and Councillor Durrant.
I just want to note that as a small parish, we have taken a fair share of new housing, and I just want that noted. It is in the report, and I would ask you as councillors to reread that.
Councillor Durrant.
Thank you. Again, just a bit of clarification for me. By stating that the reason is to do with a 5-year land supply, does this mean it would count towards the 5-year land supply? Or because we have other sites around, certainly in my ward, which are similar, but they are classed as windfall and not counted in the 5-year land supply. So I'm not sure what the consistency is. You may not be able to answer that now, but that's my concern.
This is an application which is a PIP. Only when technical details consent is approved would a full planning permission, would there be a planning permission for the site. So not until such time as technical details consent was approved would it count towards our 5-year housing land supply. The housing land supply point is that it affects our assessment and the balance that we must consider. It becomes a tilted balance, as I've outlined a moment ago. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? I'll make that 5. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll make that 7. That is refused. Sorry, okay, that motion has fallen. So need a proposer to an alternative proposal. Councillor Rattigan.
I'm happy to propose rejection on the basis that the siting, because it is in the open countryside and outside the settlement boundary, is not acceptable.
And seconded by Councillor Frost. Moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour? And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 5. 5. That is refused. And Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's a recommendation for refusal based on the location of and siting of the development outside the settlement boundary.
Thank you, Luke. Number 6, 4 wheelwrights, Highclere. And Greg.
Thank you, Chair. This application is an application for the erection of a 2-storey rear extension and the demolition of an outbuilding. There is no update to the application, Chair. Thank you.
Could have our only speaker, and that's Mr. Sopp.
And the actual owner.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Sopp. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button is in front of you.
Yes, I'm Mr. Folds, not Mr. Sopp. Mr. Sopp's the agent, I'm the owner. Application is a resubmission. We took on board the previous planning officer's comments and have prepared an amended design based on the discussions and advice with the previous planning officers. The first floor part of the extension has been moved away from the neighbours' boundaries to avoid an overbearing impact. Due to the orientation, us being to the northeast of the adjoining neighbours, there will be no overshadowing caused by the extension. It's worth noting that the side extension is not possible due to restrictive covenants on the property. The design is in keeping with the current appearance of the property and overall development. To address some of the comments on the applications, of the 4 objections, one of the objectors actually stated the first line, saying they do not object to the extension, but they're just questioning some parking issues. The design described as out of character, we've made a conscious effort to design the extension to match the character of the surrounding properties. Inaccurate comments regarding the access to the cul-de-sac is a one-way system. It isn't. There's a chicane as you come into the development, but it is definitely not one way. Concerns regarding construction disruptions, regarding access and parking. The access to the road is a modern design, and as such, we would expect this to have allowances for modern vehicles to use it. The area on land at the front of the property has off-road parking for 4 vehicles. I only have 1, so there is adequate parking. So construction contractors can park off-road. There's also an area of off-road storage, which is our front yard. Regarding the effects to the wildlife, as part of the application, the Conservation Officer and the Biodiversity Officer would have consulted, if appropriate, and they've not raised any concerns. There are inaccurate comments regarding piling. There is no reference to this in the application. To this objection, it's fictitious. Referring to the view of the neighbours' properties, there is no view that the proposal is destroying for its creation. A comment was also made regarding setting a precedent re our extension on this development. In 2010, a large extension was approved and built on at number 10. There were no objections at that point. To summarise, we have been working with the planning officers at Basingstoke and Dean to reach a design that is considered acceptable, and we believe the proposal should be approved based on the above information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No? Debate? In that case, I will move it from the chair, seconded by Councillor Frost. Anybody wish to speak? No? Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Great. Everybody. Thank you. Greg, that's approved.
Thank you, Chair. That's approved as per the agenda paper.
Item number 7, land adjacent to Pear Tree Cottage, Aldermaston Road, Pamber End. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. It's an application for the erection of a 2-bedroom, single-storey dwelling house. There is an update, if I could draw members' attention to that. It provides details of a viewing at the site and provides comments from the agent, which do address reason for refusal 3, so that's now withdrawn by officers, and provide the applicant context to reason for refusal 2 with regard to the sink. It is noted that the sink is being used as a construction compound under permitted development currently, but permitted development does require that the land is reinstated to its former condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If we could have our first speaker, Mr. Cottrell. Good evening, Mr. Cottrell. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Chair. As you've just heard, originally there were 3 reasons for refusal. Obviously, number 3 has just been removed, which is great. The first then reason, the setting of the listed building. This, as I've said before, is a subjective one. The views of the listed building have already been altered, but not by the building works that are taking place right now, but by the fact that the owners of the adjoining dwelling have installed large fences, hedges and gates, which has removed all the views of the listed building from the public domain. This in turn, in our view, has then altered the setting of the listed building, which for those of you who were there on Friday will have seen this. The Historic Environment team have also stated that the building is for a simple agricultural workers' dwelling and would have had a connection to the land. However, this is incorrect. The official designation is for a general labourer's dwelling, which is very different. It's worth pointing out that the application site is now already residential land as approved under a previous scheme for the dwelling which is currently under construction. This again should have changed the Conservation Officer's views and the level of harm that they've identified, which is less than substantial. In recent appeals, inspectors have asserted that significant weight should be given to the benefits of even a single dwelling, so we take the view that the alleged harm does not outweigh the benefits of a much needed bungalow within the borough. Turning to the concerns raised regarding the sink. Contained in the update paper is a brief on this matter, but in summary, this designation does not provide a statutory protection for the land. The designation was applied incorrectly, and all the previous applications on this site have not raised any concerns in this regard. This is largely due to the fact that Hampshire Biodiversity Information Centre assessed this site back in 2019. They then decided that the sink should be applied to the site as a whole. This was actually only then officially added to the site within the last few months, without the current owners actually knowing that this had been applied. The sink itself being applied to the whole of the site, it doesn't, in terms of the actual application site, this doesn't actually have any of the reed grasses that has been identified by Hampshire in terms of their actual sink approval. The officer states on page 323 that where a development doesn't comply with the policy in this regard, then they will only be permitted if it is clearly demonstrated that there is an overriding public need to outweigh the harm. Given the site is already residential, it's been cleared prior to the sink being applied, and the proposed dwelling is for a bungalow, which is much needed in the borough, again, we believe that the benefits would outweigh this harm. So to
You have
conclude,
1 minute remaining.
Yeah, to conclude, this site, being currently residential land, is for a proposed bungalow which does outweigh, in our view, any identified harm in terms of the sink and the listed building at a time when the borough do need not only bungalows but housing in general, and I therefore ask to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr Cotterill? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Slimming. Good evening, Councillor Slimming. You will have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Those of you who attended the site visit would have actually seen the setting that the new house would, that the existing annex to Pear Tree Cottage has got at the moment. You can only see the roof, and there is a very large fence around the area, which is quite noticeable. Pear Tree Cottage itself, obviously, was built with permission, and the annex is in the grounds of that building. I visited the site in May this year, just before the previous application, which was refused. It was a building site, and I am the last person to want to suggest that we ignore a designation of the sink being very much environmentally friendly. However, the officer just said that obviously they've got to return it to the condition it was before, having obviously had permitted development. I do not know how that could be achieved. The designation was given because of certain grasses and other things that were on the site, which have obviously been completely destroyed by the fact that this has been a building site, unknown to the applicants. So I think, you know, if we've got to be pragmatic, we're basically shutting the door after the horse has bolted. This particular part of the road, those of you who know the A340, has had a lot of development on it, and this is one of the last sites, I think, that will join that up to be Ribbon. And the house that is already there and being built is quite a substantial one, and obviously that was given permission. So this is a much smaller building next door to it. I cannot see how this will make any contrary to what is being developed there. There are other areas along the road that might come forward as well. But I do think that the reasons given, obviously the third reason, the flood risk assessment, has been overturned. The setting of the Pear Tree Cottage isn't able to be alongside a pasture because the pasture doesn't exist. And the pasture that was there, I honestly can't see how it can be reinstated.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Slimming? No? Thank you very much. If you could turn your microphone off, it didn't go off.
Sorry.
Thank you. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to think, what is the height of the proposed bungalow, okay, versus the proposed garage plans? Because I notice that there is a gym above the garage, and I'm just wondering, is it proposed that the garage will be taller than the bungalow? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. The house is proposed to be 6.8 metres in height and the garage 6.2 metres. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, hi. In relation to consistency, I have to say I'm struggling to understand how the harm outweighs the benefit with the 5-year housing supply comment and the state of the site when we visited it. I don't understand how on one level we can argue one way and then on another level on the same night argue another way. So, I mean, it's clearly a building site. I have sinks in my ward that have been destroyed by the tenant farmer right by the River Loddon, and they were never required to return it. So I just can't understand why and how the officer decided that the harm outweighed the benefit. And I wonder whether you could explain to me.
Councillor Cubitt, what is your question to the officer?
But that's exactly it. How is it? I just come to that question when you interrupted me.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is a question of considering the tilted balance. Here you have a site, it is a building site at the moment, but permitted development requires that it's returned to its former condition. Just picking up on something the agent said, it was previously a grass paddock, part of a site of importance of nature conservation, however that came about, that is what its designation is. So it's a greenfield site that is a sink, and it sits adjacent to a grade 2 listed building. Its development adjacent to it, it will have an impact. It will change the setting of it. Obviously, it's for members to consider the degree of impact that that will have. As I said previously, for the previous application that you refer to, it is a matter of balance. There will be a harm here. There will be an impact by developing the site in its view to do that tilted balance. But where there is an impact to the listed building, if you consider that is a negative impact to the listed building, it takes you out of that tilted balance.
Can I have a second question? So, firstly, I hear what you're saying, but I respectfully disagree in terms of it being more harmful than a benefit. But my question is this. Further down the road, there is also another listed building, and we all live in wards where there are many listed buildings in urban environments where hideous monstrosities are put next door to them. This is a bungalow, it's on a building site, and the precedent has already been set with a very comparable listed building further down the road, which is immediately next door to a whole host of other houses. So how does precedent square with that comment with regards to you and the tilted balance no longer being applicable because of the proximity of the listed building, and how can you square it with the hideous fence that you can't remove either?
I think there might be a few questions there rolled up into one. In terms of precedent, each application is determined on its own merits. The situation here is different to any other one. The merits of the listed building are different. Any proposal in itself is different. Any site itself is different. As I said, the proposal here is to introduce a new dwelling next door to a listed building. It will have an impact. It's for you, and I hear that you disagree, and that's within your role to be able to consider that. I'm not going to seek to expand anything beyond what the report already says. That impact needs to be considered. And if members think that the impact is negative on the setting of the listed building, it takes you out of the tilted balance. If you consider there's no impact on the listed building because of its setting already being negatively impacted, then that's within your gift to consider that. Obviously, the nearer you go to the listed building, the greater the impact. If it was sitting cheek by jowl with the listed building, I presume you would suggest there was a greater impact. It's nearer than the already approved scheme, so there is a greater impact. Officers' views that's harmful. That's one reason for refusal. The other is in respect of the sink, the habitat. Regardless of how that was arrived at, the habitat will be lost, and that's contrary to our own policies, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling to understand at the moment because this proposed development is in the middle, and then there's another house that already has approval and has been built there. So if you have to turn this bit back into paddock, how is that going to impact on the already existing building? And I don't see how you can square the two. It doesn't make sense to me that there's a house just here that's already been approved and built, and then this bit here, you're saying, no, you can't build here, you have to turn it all back into... How does that affect access for this house that's already been built?
Thank you, Chair. The submitted plan on page 329 shows how the access goes across the frontage only up towards the already approved scheme. So there will be a slim access strip that will go forward to the approved dwelling. The rest of the site back from the car parking area and beyond towards the garage. At the moment, it's only approved uses as a paddock. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? In that case, debate. Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you, Chair. Just like most of the decisions that come to this committee, this one too is actually very difficult, because I can understand, I know there's houses either side, okay, but I'm struggling with the fact that, one, this is a bungalow with a very, very high roof, and I'm just wondering whether, you know, once this is built, the next step is to actually get a second story, okay, maybe with dormer windows in there, which will match the garage, okay, where you've got the garage with the gym above it. I don't like the site currently because it is a building site. I'm struggling on how you're going to return that to paddock, okay, to paddock land, you know, with the sink. So I'm really struggling here. I appreciate officers have got this down for refusal, but you know, I'm struggling to refuse it because it will just tidy up the area, okay, so well. However, my only concern is, you know, any potential permitted development rights on the bungalow, which I think, you know, totally need removing from this particular plot, should the committee be minded to go against officer recommendation. But I'm genuinely quite conflicted on this, okay, and I'll be very interested to hear, you know, other members' debate. Thank you.
Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, well, as other members, in view of the questions I've asked the officers, I don't believe, respectfully, that the harm outweighs the benefits. I think it's clear that the sink can't be recreated. I don't think it will negatively impact substantially the listed building, which would erase the tilted balance, and therefore I believe, in fact, the proposed bungalow would improve the vista, and it's not a planning consideration to be fearful of what might happen in the future So I don't think that's a consideration that we as members should take into account in this instance.
I think I've got Councillor Durrant, followed by Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you. My concern over the refusal is that I think the listed building has sort of lost its contact with the area, context within the area anyway. You know, it's almost inside a stockade, and it has no real great external view of the area, and people looking in can't see it in its context. So I think that's a little bit misleading to me. So I don't see that the harm outweighs the benefit.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair, and I confirm I was on the viewing panel. I have to say the Grade 2 listed building is already impacted by what's already been built there. And this is for the erection of a 2-bedroomed small dwelling house on one level. I mean, let's be very honest with ourselves. If this was coming forward almost anywhere else, we'd be gladly saying yes to it. I have to say that the sink doesn't exist in my view, and the fact that the garage sits to the rear of it and therefore is not visually impactful, I think is an additional reason for moving approval on this. Approval on this application, as in my view it does not cause harm. The sink is no longer achievable, and therefore the harm that is detailed subjectively in this report does not come to pass.
Sue, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on some of the points that have been made with regards to the current state of the site. You need to, in some ways, park that to one side. They are using the site under permitted development as a building site, but under permitted development they have to reinstate the land. I accept reinstating a sink is probably not going to be achievable. What you have to consider though, and it's in the Conservation Officer's comments, that this is the last bit of open space and it forms the setting of that listed building. Many listed buildings do have large fences or screening around them, but it's still the setting of that listed building, and it's reinstating that back to grass paddock recreates that setting of that listed building, and that is the key thing here that I think you need to consider. Forget about how it may look at the moment, because that does have to be reinstated back to a grass paddock. It isn't residential land, it is only a grass paddock. That's what it should be.
Councillor Cubitt.
I'm happy to propose we approve it.
Thank you. Been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tomlin.
So, and I would just ask that we consider that refusal 3 is turned into a condition, and that we remove permitted development rights on the building. So are you okay with that proposal?
Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval with the conditions outlined by Councillor Tomlin. Sorry, Greg.
Before you take the vote, obviously we've heard Councillor Tomlin suggest a couple of conditions. I thought it might just be helpful if you were minded to vote towards the approval that I outlined, perhaps a full range of conditions that you might wish to consider. The first would be that there's reference to development being carried out in accordance with the approved plans. There's then your standard 3-year expiration, material schedule, hard and soft landscaping, construction hours, delivery hours, parking provision, cycle storage, waste storage, construction method statement, water standards, garage maintaining an ancillary use, biodiversity net gain demonstration, given that the proposal would result in the loss of a sink, even if by designation only, compliance with the preliminary ecological appraisal, then the flood risk assessment compliance and the provision of updated calculations, and then, from what I've heard this evening, the removal of permitted development rights as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cubitt, Councillor Tomlin, are you content with those?
Are all of them, I'm sorry because I don't sit on this committee very often, are those all, I mean they sound boilerplate to me, are they required? Because I just think with a bungalow it's insane to require cycle storage on the A340.
No, they're not all pre-commencement conditions, but they are. in terms of are they necessary, then yes, that complies with our own policies and SPD requirements.
They are fairly standard conditions on an approval.
Okay, I just think very often we just whack on these conditions and they're like an indirect tax on people that, you know, I just think with the cost of living, we need to be much more careful and judicious about the requirements we expect of people.
It provides opportunity for sustainable modes of transport by having a secure location for you.
I mean, I'm passionately supportive of cyclists, but I wouldn't like to cycle on A340 personally.
Right, been moved and seconded for approval with the conditions. Those in favour? Yeah. Yeah. And that's everybody. That is approved. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. The application is approved subject to the conditions that I listed moments ago for the reasons of the proposal having an acceptable landscape impact, not having a negative impact on the sink and thus biodiversity, and not having a negative impact on the setting of the listed building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Item number 8, 29 Southern Road, Basingstoke. Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is at 29 Southern Road. The proposal is for the installation of replacement windows to the front of the dwelling. This application is part retrospective, with the two first floor windows having already been replaced. The members had the benefit of a site visit. The application is recommended for refusal as per those provided in the case officer's report. It should be noted that they are subdivided in the officer's report. It should be read as one reason for refusal, so ignore the subdivisions. In conjunction with the reason for refusal, as this is part retrospective, there is a recommendation for enforcement action for the first floor windows to be removed and replaced with replica windows to match those originally in the building. There was an update paper as well, which just highlighted the reason why the application was brought to committee at the request of Councillor Hussey. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. There are no speakers, so questions to officers? No. Debate. Councillor Hussey.
SPD states quite clearly that replacement windows in conservation areas should be on a like-for-like basis. So those houses which have wood framed, single glazed sash windows should be retained and repaired wherever necessary. And if they can't be repaired, then replaced by the same. Double glazed units are not permitted. The SPD goes on to state that thermal efficiency is not a sufficient justification. But when you look at the policy, and policies, remember, are guidelines. They are not mandates, they are not rules. They're there for guidance. To depart from them, you must have justifiable reasons, but you can depart from them. And the policy states quite clearly, unless it has been clearly demonstrated that they are beyond repair, it goes on, single glazing should generally, not must, should generally be replaced by single glazing. I'm now going to refer to an officer report that's not before you. It's one that came before us back in June, and it was an application for Southern Road for UPVC windows. The property had already changed the windows once. They had modern wooden frame windows. So it wasn't replacing the original. But the officer's report states this, and I think it's very important. On balance, it is considered that the proposals, UPVC double glazed windows, would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. And that is application 22/00229/HSE. Case officer is named here, so I won't mention in this meeting. So it is established by officers that in certain circumstances, UPVC double glazed units retain the character and appearance in a conservation area. And that refers to a house in Southern Road, just 10 doors away from the one we're considering this evening, number 29, just 10 doors away. And if you look at Southern Road, only 1/4 of the properties have got their original wood frame sash windows. 75% have been changed. Same with the doors, either UPVC or some composite material. Now, I actually agree with the officer's report from June this year. It is possible to achieve both conservation of appearance and conservation of energy with replacement UPVC double glazed windows. One of the problems that residents have got now is that the policy prevents them from improving their homes, prevents them from conserving energy, and commits them to having higher bills than their neighbours who have got replacement UPVC windows. And I think with the changes and emphasis on problems with climate change are becoming more visible day by day, and energy supplies being restricted because of the Ukraine situation, forcing up prices. Even the government is handing out money to try to help residents out with the huge bills they're getting. We are constraining some of our residents. We're making them pay higher bills by not being more flexible. Like the officer did say in a previous case, that it is possible to have UVC double glazed units. So I think there's so much has changed since this policy was first agreed, that it is now dated. And therefore I would like to propose this evening that the application we're determining for 29 Southern Road actually be approved. That would be my first proposal. But I have two more proposals, which are probably more contentious. The Development Control Committee should press for an urgent review of the relevant policies so that replacements which emulate the original features and preserve the character of a conservation area should be reconsidered. That's not just windows, that's guttering, because in Southern Road, people with cast iron guttering and cast iron downspouts, they can't replace those either. So I'd like this committee to ask for an urgent review. And the third one is the one which I think might raise a few eyebrows. As an interim measure, until this policy has been reviewed and agreed, Development Control Committee should allow single glazed windows to be replaced with double glazed windows, and cast iron gutters and downspouts to replace with UPVC. But I'd like the three proposals to be considered separately. The important one is that the application for number 29, I believe, should be approved. My colleague to my right actually has photographs of the windows before replacement, which shows them rotting. So there is some evidence, but what wasn't presented with the application. And I'm hopeful that we will look upon this as an example of what we can do for conservation of appearance and conservation of energy to be bedfellows and not diametrically opposed. Thank you, Chair.
Sue, would you like to come in? Let Sue say her bit first, and then I'll bring you in.
I'm going to just let Greg. Talk on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think firstly the point to make is we're here to consider this application as Development Control Committee. We're here to consider the application that's before us. It's not the arena to be proposing or considering changes to policy. So with that in mind, and we're here to consider each application, obviously you've mentioned another example. Looking at that other example, which the case officer had already looked at and taken into account, that proposal there was a proposal to replace windows that were already modern windows and had no architectural or historic merit. So this proposal, on the other hand, are windows that are considered to have historic merit, and their replacement is not with PVC, UPVC is not considered to be appropriate. It's considered that would be harmful to the conservation area. The policies, we must consider development in accordance with development plan policy, as you say, unless material considerations say otherwise. But the starting point is the development plan. We have a development plan policy that respects the statutory controls and the MPPF in terms of seeking to preserve or enhance conservation areas as matters of heritage, irreplaceable features. And if we remove windows that are of historic value and replace them with windows that are modern, then you are causing harm to the conservation area. That harm to the conservation area is a statutory consideration. It must be given great weight in the determination of an application, even if less than substantial harm were considered. I understand that there is a conflict between heritage and energy conservation, but the policy framework that we have and the statutory consideration of heritage are such that the proposal here is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Yep.
Much of what you've just said is what I actually said myself, that they're replacing modern wooden windows. The one I quoted the report from June. But the key thing in that report is, regardless of what the windows were before, the officers, and it applies to all of you, because you all agree these reports, it says quite clearly, on balance, it is considered that the proposals for UPVC double glazed windows would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. Well, either they do or they don't. It's black and white.
In that instance, the development preserved the character of the conservation area because it was losing modern windows and replacing modern windows. What you have at the moment is a different, completely different starting point. You've got historic windows that are considered to be of value to the conservation area, but you would be losing historic windows to replace that with modern windows. So it's a different starting point between the two applications. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor Hussey has moved for approval of this. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bowes, seconded. Thank you. Councillor Cubitt, you wanted to come in?
Yes, the subject came up at EPH, and as the officers have already said, we're here to discuss this application and nothing else. But we did discuss at EPH, and that's a better place for this further discussion to take place in relation to requirements of historic buildings and the financial pressures that it places on some of our more vulnerable residents, but whilst preserving our heritage. So I just wanted to flag that up.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this application, not about the general picture, but purely on this application? Yep. Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Chair. I do think this is a difficult one. I think that if with modern UPVC windows, if they can achieve the same look as the existing windows, I don't think we should have a problem with it. But you can't really tell because from the site visit, you couldn't actually see what was there before because they've already replaced them. It is difficult. I do appreciate that the resident here is obviously trying to conserve energy and to keep the house warm, etc. But again, we do have policies and reasons policies in place for a reason. And, I really do think that maybe he should have come to us first before he started ripping out his old windows and asked for some advice. So I'm not entirely sure it should be approved. I do think the policies need looking at, but as it currently stands, if the officer's recommendation is for refusal, then maybe the resident should come back to us and see what he can do to achieve his aims, which also don't conflict with policy. It is a difficult one. I do appreciate both sides, but again, you can't go against policies that we have, just because you'll get people ripping out windows and shoving in ugly monstrosities that don't fit in keeping with the area. So it's a hard one.
Councillor Durrant.
I agree. It is a difficult one, but because it's a balance of conservation versus climate change. and this is a council that declared a climate change emergency. So it's very hard to stop somebody improving their home to improve energy conservation. If it's sympathetically done with the original style, then I'm struggling to see a problem with that, because having been on the viewing panel and walked up the street, I saw so many different windows, doors, and I really struggle to see why this person should not be allowed to improve their home. But I do take the officer's point that we must try and preserve the conservation rules, and the policies are important. But we've set ourselves a rod by saying we've got a climate emergency and we've got conservation. Which one trumps which?
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Cubitt in, Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. More a point of order than anything. How many paragraphs are we allowed to have pre-written before a meeting asking for approval of something before we appear to be predetermined to a member of the public? Councillor Hussey spoke for a good 5 minutes in favour of approving. Is there really no way that we can exclude him from being able to vote on this? Is it really only up to the member to determine? Because that seems ridiculous to me, that we have a member that is clearly predetermined, has paragraphs and paragraphs, 3 different motions that he wanted to move, but he's not predetermined. We're going to let him vote on this? That's ridiculous.
Thank you, Councillor Howard Sorrell. I think if you look back through some meetings, there are many councillors in this room who have done exactly that, so I think it's something that from time to time happens, but right now we're not discussing that, we're discussing this case. My input on it is I'm in the same position as everybody else. I'm torn between 2 policies. 2 thoughts that come to mind is, one, the less original windows there are in that area, the more important it becomes to retain so people can see what was there. You know, the rarity value of it comes into it. The other thing, on the energy conservation, which I am very, very conscious of, having living in a house with single glazing, you can fit secondary double glazing, and I don't believe you actually need planning permission for it. There is a lot of very, very good secondary double glazing around which will achieve the same thermal values, or very nearly the same thermal values. I think it's probably time we went to the vote on this one. All right, I'll take 2 more speakers. Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Cubitt. Please make it quick, and then we are going to the vote.
Okay, it is just very quick. There's just a slight concern, the fact that on the viewing panel, the resident of the house in question didn't seem to be aware that we were coming and hasn't shown up tonight. Have we given this resident the opportunity? Does he actually know that we're here tonight to determine this? Because he wasn't aware that we were going to look at his house. He came out quite concerned that people were peering into his windows. So it might be more sensible to submit that for a deferment until we can ascertain whether the chap actually knows what we're doing here tonight.
If I can just, so on page 335, the applicant has an agent acting for him. When they have an agent acting for them, we have to go through the agent. Unfortunately, some agents are better than others. That's all I would say.
Councillor Cubitt, and then we are going to the vote.
If nobody's seconded Councillor Hussey, I'm happy to second his approval.
It's already been seconded. Right. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. And those against? And abstentions? That is approved. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. So that is recommended for approval. Obviously, that's contrary to the recommendation, so I'm going to move it forward to recommended with conditions, which would be to build out in accordance with the submitted details and also to be enacted in the next 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey, you mentioned two other motions. I'm told the second one, or the third one, is, of the three, we cannot discuss tonight. Can you repeat the second one, please?
Yes. I'm not happy that we've got to the situation we're in tonight, where we are arguing about conservation of appearance, heritage value, and conservation of energy and people's energy costs. And there'll be many more applications. I mean, I can't mention, but there's one that's been refused a couple of times in Chequers Road. I can't mention which area it is, but there's a few, and a lot in they're in my ward. And I do think it's time now, all policies to be reviewed on a fairly regular basis. And all I'm asking for is not a conclusion, but they review the policy in the light of current circumstances, in terms of climate change and energy supplies. That we relook. And if they confirm the policy until it stays as it is, that is a good outcome. If they change it, it's a good outcome. They reconsider it under the current climate.
Chair, I wonder if I could help. I think the policies will be reviewed as part of the local plan, which is temporarily held.
What I'm trying to do is this committee to be a catalyst to get it looked at sooner, because at the time the next local plan is agreed, there will be several more applications.
But it's not the role of this committee to make those sort of recommendations.
But I'm asking this committee to urge our other members of the council to get this review undertaken.
Yeah, you can write individually to the head of planning to urge that.
And have it recorded in the minutes, please.
Okay, let's deal with it quickly. What we think. First one, I've got Councillor Tomlin and Councillor Cubitt. We've got a proposal from Councillor Hussey. I want to do this very quickly. So I'm going to take those two speakers. Is there a seconder to Councillor Hussey's motion? Yeah. Councillor Gaskell. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Gaskell.
Sorry, can I just add that, you know, we shouldn't be making people who have got these type of properties put new stuff in which isn't up to standard. Materials have come on a lot, manufacturing techniques have come on a lot, and we should be able to consider those as part of the conservation area look.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just help. EPH, we were given the task and finish panel. One of the motions that came from full council was sustainability of in conservation areas. The recommendation of the task and finish group was that we would support the review of conservation areas with this particular sustainability role in the head of planning, who was advocating that that is on her task list to do, and that we would support accelerating it and making sure there was enough resource to do that. So that link with the local plan, I think it's got to go to Cabinet to be verified. I think it's already in progress. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Cubitt, and then as so we will vote.
Ask him to withdraw it on the basis it's in progress.
Councillor Hussey, on the basis that Councillor Tomlin has said it is effectively in progress, and I was part of that meeting, so I agree with him that effectively it is in progress. Right, would you like to withdraw the motion? Thank you. That motion is withdrawn. The third one is not the remit of this committee. So, thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Councillor Hussey, for the benefit of the minutes, could you repeat the motion anyway?
In view of the information I received from Councillor Tomlin this evening, I would withdraw my proposal.
The actual, yeah. Oh, it's fine. Anne's got a note of it. Thank you. Right. Land south of Doric Avenue, and west of footpath Doric Avenue, Chinham. Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. The ninth item before you this evening is for land to south of Doric Avenue and west of footpath Doric Avenue, Chinham. The proposal seeks advert consent for a parish council notice board, which will be used for the display of notices, agendas, etc. There are no updates in regards to this application, and it's recommended to be granted. Thank you, Chair.
First speaker and only speaker, Councillor Durrant. Could you clarify as well when you start, are you speaking as a borough councillor or as a parish councillor? You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Right, I don't think we'll get to that point. I'm speaking as a parish councillor. I was surprised by the number of objections. I noted they came from relatively few houses, but that's not material. We need to communicate with that area of the parish. It's far to the south, away from the village and where the main parish council activities happen. We have in the past actually delivered to every single door notifications. That's not sustainable. We tried to run a second parish council meeting every month in Sherfield Park, which is nearby. No one attended. And we also, they have a Facebook page, and we've tried a number of times to gain access to that to communicate, and we've not been allowed to. So we have a duty to communicate with all parishioners, and that's why we need a notice board in that area. The rest of the parish has notice boards, which the parish council communicate with the residents. There are no objections from highways in terms of restricting the sight lines. We're unable to move it next to the more desirable place near the playground or the bus stop because they're not in Bramley. Simple as that. So we needed to put it somewhere where it was visible, that people could see it and would go and read it. It is not going to be a metal grey monstrosity. It's going to have some rustic character to it. I wouldn't put the drawing our clerk did on my fridge, but it doesn't do the thing justice. The other thing I would say is your condition there for 5 years because of advertising. We're not intending to use it for advertising. This is for community information only. Therefore, that condition I think is superfluous. On that basis, I think the officers are right to approve this application. Thank you.
Questions for Councillor Durrant? No? Thank you very much. And I'll say good night. Presumably you won't come back. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Durrant touched upon it. In the conditions, condition number 2, can you please explain exactly what you mean, okay, by condition 2? Because I'm a bit confused where it says this consent shall be for a limited period of 5 years. Does that mean they've got 5 years to actually put the board up there, or is the board only allowed there for 5 years?
So under the regulations, it's a standard condition that you have to put on every advertisement consent. The way that it works, there's actually a section within the regulations where you can have it for longer than that, as long as we don't require them to remove it, which that condition doesn't. So it can be deemed consent after that time. Okay, thank you.
So, sorry, Chair, please may I have a supplementary? Thank you. So you're saying to me, okay, that a parish council notice board is only got permission to be there for 5 years and then it has to be taken down. Is that right?
No, it then becomes deemed consent. It then becomes deemed consent. It then becomes approved infinitum.
Thank you.
Any more questions for officers? Debate? Proposal? Yeah, Councillor Cubitt proposing, seconder Councillor Howard Sorrell. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. That is approved.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, that application was approved subject to the conditions listed in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to the officers. And we'll see you at the next viewing panel. And if you remember, there will be a meeting with the officers immediately after it. Thank you.